Hello everyone, it's Veronica and welcome back to my channel. Today's video is going to be about looking for inspiration or just getting out of that slump that you've maybe been in a year or however long you've really been in it. For me, I have always found writing novel and verses and poetry to really get me out of that slump, and that is because they're short and you can write literally anything in a novel and verse / poetry. For me, I've always found that novel and verses have always been a way to get me out of the slump because I write about various different things and they're so short that I want to write more. That's one of the great things I have found when writing novel and verses. What I'm about to tell you guys is not just based on novel and verses. It can be about poetry, short stories, anything that is short and concise and you can write in a day or two. And that is the great thing about these types of writing techniques, that you can find anywhere and you can get inspiration anywhere. And especially now that we are in self-quarantine, it's hard to get inspiration from the outside. So for me, when I write novel and verses, they are really about ancient Greece. My very first novel and verse was actually about the Battle of Marathon, and I really enjoyed it. Writing that novel and verse in 8th grade for my English class actually really led me to enjoy writing my own novel and verses whenever I'm hitting that slump or I have lost interest in writing. And when I write a novel and verse, it's for me to really reignite that inspiration that I've lost in the past few days. And if you're trying to get out of that slump or trying to rediscover that inspiration that you've seemed to lost, I do hope that you can find inspiration in this video to help you out and discover what you can write. Today, I actually did an experiment where I wrote one novel and verse in one day. I wrote a novel and verse called Project Surf. For me, my novel and verse writing style has always been about ancient Greece. I really enjoyed writing it. If you guys want to go check that out, it will be down in the description box to my Wattpad profile as well as the story that I wrote this on. I will be publishing it in week by week just because I don't want to publish it all at once. The first chapter will most definitely be down in the description box below for you guys to check it out. It's very short. It should be done relatively fast. For the story, I only wrote about 5 chapters, and usually for me, these chapters range from 200-300 words, nothing too lengthy. I don't think I've ever written a novel and verse that's more than 500 words per chapter. And that's the great thing about novel and verses. And today I brought 2 inspirational novel and verses that I physically own, and it is Milk and Honey and The Sun and Her Flowers by Rupi Kaur. Apologies for saying the name wrong. These are 2 great novel and verses. If you compare a novel to a novel and verse, there are some great aspects to it, because in Milk and Honey, as well as The Sun and Her Flowers, there are actually images, and if we see, there are different things. Like, you've got different things, different types of artwork that can relate to your story. And why I want to talk about the Milk and Honey and The Sun and Her Flowers is because these are types of novel and verses that are short but do have paragraph long entries in it. These types, you've still got your image aspects, but you've also got your writings. We've got short ones like this, and we've got paragraphs like this, and I like that because you can really do anything with a novel and verse. So you've got different lengths, different images, or even ones that take up 2 pages because you want to say what you want within the story. And these 2 are just 2 of the thousands, millions maybe, novel and verses that are really great to get inspiration from. And I love these 2 books because they tell different stories in each of the words, and your novel and verse can too. When you're reading a novel like, say, Lovely War, well, compared to a novel in verse, they've got different aspects to it. You're looking for length and a full hard set story in such novel, but in a novel and verse, especially when you're writing, you're looking for short, fluttery, butterfly stories within each chapter. It can be your own craziness, your own thoughts that you're like, I want to get it on the page, and you can really make a story out of it. And that's why novel and verses are one of my favorite getting out of that slump phase writing styles. It's not just novel and verses that really help me get inspired again. It's also poetry, and I love poetry. I myself do not have a copy of poetry on my shelves at the moment, but if you do, look through it. Just scan different things. And the great thing about poetry, as well as novel and verses, they kind of fit together, is that they don't have to rhyme. You think about poetry and you think about rhyming. You think about the sky was high, the wind was flowing in the... I can't rhyme today, but in general, that's great about poetry because nothing ever has to rhyme. When we think about these types of stories, we think, is it really interesting to read a book like this, a novel in verse, or a really thin story? Absolutely. Sometimes we think poetry doesn't have a story in it, or even a novel in verse, and I have sure thought of that even while I write novel in verses. But don't let that sway you off of writing a novel in verse or even a poetry book. You tell your own stories through each of the words. And I know that when talking about novel and verses, we're afraid to step in because we might think, especially if you're publishing, will they be interested in such a short novel or short story? Yes. Especially in Wattpad, you can find different things on there because Wattpad is a really big platform. You can have poetry, novel and verses, one-shots. And if you guys don't know what one-shots are, it's just literally as it says, one chapter of anything. When you're writing your own novel and verse, it has your own story you want to tell through those words. So I hope you guys found inspiration in writing your own novel and verses or even your own poetry. Because, like I said many times throughout this video, poetry and novel and verses are never set in stone. They are free to be whatever you want it. In the past and right now, really gotten me out of any type of slump I've felt. I recently have been on a 1-year slump in writing for myself and Wattpad, as well as on my blog. I took a whole year off, but then this was before self-quarantine and everything happened, but I got into writing again on blog and personally because I was getting all these inspiration from the different books I was reading, the TV shows, the movies, everything that I saw within my own eyes. If you think that it might be wrong to get ideas from TV shows, movies, or even books, don't worry about it. You don't be afraid to get ideas from books. Granted, you don't want to write any of your stories word for word unless it's marked fan fiction, because I know if I were to write something very, very similar, maybe even the characters, anything, I know that I would have to mark it fan fiction. But if you got some ideas like the magic in it, you're like, I really like that idea and I kind of want to incorporate it, do not be afraid at all. I know I've certainly gotten ideas from different books I've been reading. Historical fiction, I have certainly got some ideas off of that. Different types of fantasies. The fantasy novel I'm writing right now does have a tiny bit of aspects from different fantasy I've been pulling out of different stories I've read. Like I said, don't be afraid to get any ideas that you have found on the internet, in books, in TV shows, in writing, in anything you have discovered. I hope you guys have found this video a little helpful, and if you guys want to get started in your own novel and verse, I highly suggest it. Go forth and conquer that novel and verse or that writing slump, because you can get out of that writing slump, even if it takes you a year to get out of it, or however long you have found you were in that slump. Novel and verses, poetry can help getting out of that slump. I do suggest starting small, like a novel in verse or poetry, but you can, and I believe you can, beat that slump in any shape or form of writing. I do suggest tackling small things first when getting out of that slump, and not big things like writing a novel or reading a novel, because sometimes you might say, that was a little difficult, I don't find that inspiration in doing anything, and you go back into that slump. That's not what I suggest. I do suggest starting out small, and I do recommend these two, Milk and Honey and The Sun and Her Flowers by Ruby Kaur, because these are great novel and verses. I rated both of these 5 stars because they told their own story. They were captivating and inspirational, really. I suggest reading some type of similar published book like these two if you want to write a novel in verse, because they're fabulous. And granted, you don't have to read these two. You can read different stuff. You can get any type of inspiration from anything you get. and I hope you guys succeed in getting out of that slump, rediscovering your own writing or even your own reading passion. I hope you guys enjoyed and got something out of this video. Please like and comment down below how you guys get out of your slump. If you guys enjoy reading novel and verses and writing about novel and verses, because they do help. Or comment down below if you have any sort of tips and tricks any other viewer wants to know of how to get out of their own slump. If you guys liked and enjoyed this video, comment down below, give it a thumbs up, and hit that red subscribe button. And I will see you guys all next time for another video. Bye!